Good evening and welcome to Rock Solid Radio. I'm Linda Hutchinson, the Executive Director of Rock Solid Families.
And I'm Merrill Hutchinson, President of Rock Solid Families. And we are excited to have you join us for the next 30 minutes as we talk about the good, bad, and ugly of relationships. A huge shout out to our sponsors, La Rosa's and Buffalo Wings and Rings in Greendale, Indiana, Greendale Cinemas, and Maxwell Construction. We are so thankful for these local businesses who have made this show possible. So whether you are listening live or online, Rock Solid Radio, helping to strengthen our community one family at a time on your hometown radio, Eagle Country 99.3. Good evening. Welcome to Rock Solid Radio. Hey, this is Merrill Hutchinson, President of Rock Solid Families. And tonight we have a very interesting topic, a difficult topic, one that is just involved in so many of our marriages and our families, in the workplace. This is this has always been a big issue, but it's certainly on the growth part of its climb. And so we're going to tackle this. You want to tell everybody what we're talking about?
It's affecting our homes and our schools, our churches, our communities, and that's the topic kind of addiction, but more importantly, living with the addict, the codependency, the enabling that we see a lot of times families coming in, spouses, parents, and wanting to do, how do we help? And what is it that parameters we need to put in place to help our loved one?
And so part of what we're going to be dealing with tonight is the addiction, the actual, whether it's chemical or pornography or whatever it is. But you and I, hon, we're not trained
we're not addiction counselors,
and we're not trying to act like we are. We do help folks with that at various levels, but obviously if it gets beyond or it's very entrenched, we refer those folks to the experts. But addiction is only part of the problem. It's that living with the addict, and like you just said, that codependency and stuff. So we're going to tackle it from that side tonight. But hey, before we jump into that,
before you say,
stop.
Before you say anything more, we've had 30 years of working with couples that have been dealing with this, and please do not turn us off, because everyone out there listening has had someone that has dealt with this, whether they themselves or their family. And we know that God can redeem. We've seen lives changed, and we've seen marriages saved, and we've seen families restored. And so please, I just really encourage you to not give up on this topic, to not give up on your family members. Do not throw the baby out with the bathwater. We're going to be talking about how to do that in a healthy way. So I just wanted to put that in there before someone says, I'm done with this or done with them.
Hang in there with us, and there's going to be something for you. Okay, so before we get rolling, we need to say thanks to our sponsors for helping us put Rock Solid Radio out on the air. And so we thank you to Maxwell Construction, Buffalo Wings and Rings, Greendale Cinemas, and La Rosa's Pizza. Guys, thank you so much for all that you do for us. Hon, this is a hard subject here, but I also want to put a plug in or an ask for the work that we're doing for Rock Solid Families. We need your help. Financially, we need your help. We have great sponsors that help with the radio show. But if you like or are interested in what we're doing with serving the community, with speaking to parents, with working with health and fitness, all of these different things, we try to not let money be an issue for any of the folks that we work with. We don't turn people away. But obviously, everything comes with a cost, right? I mean, we still have to pay the bills. And so as difficult as it is, as uncomfortable, we're asking for your help, your support, your donations. And if you feel moved to do that, we ask that you contact us. And,
or go to rocksolidfamilies.org. There is a donate button. And we have families that are calling us, and man, the word is getting out. We're even getting referrals from local family physicians, local school administrators. So we definitely are trying to help. And a lot of times it is a young adult who's dealing with an addictive father, or a couple who is in crisis. we don't ever want money to be the reason why they're not coming in for help.
Right, and
So,
and we are not a medical facility by any means. We are a coaching service,
right.
and a lot of times people ask about whether we take insurance and stuff, and we don't, and we don't because we don't want to be tied up in all that. We look at a lot of what we want to do is to coach people through difficult situations so that their life doesn't get stuck.
And faith-based kind of limits us as far as, government funding or anything like that. So we believe that faith is a huge part. If you didn't listen to our show last week, we talked about the rule of faith in the home. And so we believe that that's the biggest tool in our toolbox. When we're working with a family in crisis, with working through addiction issues, that God is the Redeemer. He is our hope.
Yeah.
And we've seen him change lives.
Yeah. So if you can help us out, that would be great. We would appreciate that. Let's talk about some different things that we've got coming up, some of the where we're spending some time. We finished up our last class, or our class last week on a parenting series when school was tough. And so that went really well. And so now we are coming in. Our next one will be on March 13th. This is at Bright Elementary at 6:30 to 8. And this was going to be a little bit more your info because I know you just really have sunk your teeth into this. What's this topic going to be?
So we're going to be talking about parenting in a tech-heavy world. And again, we don't charge for any of our classes at the schools or the churches. And so this is something that we want to offer as a free resource to parents on how do they navigate through this tech world that is so overwhelming for their kids and even for adults. We're needing help
we
with
find
that.
ourselves trapped in a lot of the
And you don't have to
stuff.
go to Bright Elementary to be involved in this. It's in their library from 6:30 to 8. Anybody can attend on March 13th. And then, Hun, you've got one April 24th.
April 24th, we're going to talk about who's the boss in your house. And this is just reestablishing the role of the parent, the authoritative position that we take as being leaders. And again, we need to separate. There's authoritative and there's authoritarian.
Yeah, I messed that up last week.
Well, we are certainly not ever advocating authoritarian. Authoritative has a completely different meaning to it. And so come on out if you're trying to establish some boundaries and rules in raising your children. Hopefully we can help you out with that. Just a reminder, we continue to do our fitness classes. Those happen 6 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 8 a.m. Those are your classes, Linda.
In the morning.
And that's
Come join me.
Neat group of folks that do that. And then there's Tuesday and Thursday evenings at 6 p.m. Those are more of my classes, just for the timing's sake. And we do our Saturday at 9 a.m. And my Strong Dads class, my next 8-week series will launch on April 6th.
This is so cool. I love this for guys.
This is fun. So if you're, and again, if you do not be intimidated by the workout that we do or the conversation. I accommodate every level of fitness. As long as you're medically healthy enough to walk through those doors, we certainly wouldn't want anybody to drop over with a heart attack.
Strong dads.
Yeah, we come in, we have a great workout, and then have some great conversation about how to strengthen ourselves in the house.
I love this. Yeah, absolutely. So, Hun, this topic is so important for us because we see addiction just breaking up marriages and families. I mean, we don't have to tell anybody this, but the addiction is at an epidemic level, especially heroin in our area has been just now meth seems to be the new drug of choice in our local area. But I don't think we have to convince anybody that addiction is an issue. Last month, we talked specifically about pornography. And I think the reason why we separated that out than the one we're talking about this week is that it kind of gets rationalized and minimized as being something that's healthy or normal. It's just an urge we have. And so we kind of really unpack that, kind of debunk those myths. So if you kind of hear us today and say, wow, that's kind of me in the pornography realm, I really encourage you to watch our, I think it was February 10th show. Listen to that. But tonight we're going to talk about the whole family, not just the addict, and what we can do to help.
You know, one of the dangers with addiction, everybody quickly recognizes the heroin addict, the extreme drug addict that you see them physically just deteriorate. You see that every waking moment, their quest is for the drug. And so it completely owns them. But that's actually not how most addictions are. I think of most addictions as being functional addictions. In other words, I can still kind of carry my job.
Yep.
I can get through the day.
Yep.
My
I
family
can hide
is still somewhat intact, even though it's kind of like this slow cancer. And it tends to not get better over time. It tends to get worse. But we, as you said before, we rationalize it, we minimize it until all of a sudden the damage is done.
Yeah.
And so that is probably, we're going to talk about all of those addictions, but that addiction there, that slow functional addiction, to me is just as scary, because those are those kind of addictions that you and I see. Couples that are married for 25 years and then they get a divorce. And you're like, what in the world?
Really?
How did this happen? But it was a slow burn.
Sure. I think of two women in our work through the years that were married for multiple years and all of a sudden discovered that their husband was drinking every night in the garage and had bottles of vodka stored and hidden all over the place. Or the wife who found out after 12 years of marriage that her husband had been a drug addict the entire time. The level of betrayal and mistrust that begins with that spouse of, what the heck, I've been married to a lie. And the undermining of just the deterioration of the family there just makes me sick and sad.
Yeah, and it's that fine rationalization between vice and addiction. You know, it's just one of my vices, and we can kind of excuse it away. But like you said, we start to live a lie, and so this vice turns into something much more strong and significant.
If you're hiding
the damage. If
you're afraid of it being revealed. I had a couple who the husband was a smoker and he hid it from his wife, and she knew something was going on. She knew he was sneaking doing something, and she, of course, her mind went rampant of all the different things it could be. And when she found out it was that, he was so embarrassed, and she was a little bit relieved, but then the mistrust came up, like, what else are you hiding? So even just something simple that you think shouldn't be a big deal, if it is a big deal to your spouse, you're hiding it.
Right. Well, and again, so some of you might be out there listening going, smoking, really? Are you going to make that a big deal? No, that's not the big deal. I mean, no, it's not a very healthy thing to do, but it's the lie that created the mistrust. That's what comes out of this. And so please don't get confused on the idea that it was smoking
That's what
cigarettes.
almost ended their marriage.
Yeah, it was. Okay, so how many other things are going on? What can I trust you with? And trust, and when trust gets eroded, so too does the relationship. So, wow, this is going to be a lot of stuff, but hun, we're not going to talk just so much about the addicted. We're going to talk about the home that the addicted person lives in.
Right.
And when you and I deal with these situations, terms that often come by us are things like enabler, codependency, and all of a sudden you start to see that we've come to accept this level of addiction, and maybe not even just accept it.
Because they don't think anything can change.
Yeah.
They can't do anything about it, they think.
In some ways, we've even encouraged it, not purposefully,
Right.
but we've done stuff to encourage
Or allow.
what they're doing. And so we've helped perpetuate the problem. So a lot of our talk and our discussion tonight is going to be about, okay, wait, let's recognize our part in dealing with that person who has that addiction.
Sure. Yeah, every time I teach my Healthy Boundaries series, I will have several recovering addicts or family members who will admit, like, I need help. Like, I don't have this boundary thing very well because I've let people just dump garbage in my yard. I've let just people step on me in my life and my feelings because of their addiction. Or I have stepped on other people. Some people are recognizing how out of control they've been in relationships because of their addiction. And so, I remember a mother and daughter pair coming to my class, trying to figure out how to navigate an alcoholic husband and dad who's still in the home, but he has a problem. He's admitted he's had a problem. He's getting help. But how do they protect their heart? How do they protect their home and the rest of their family from this addiction?
Yeah.
Or the sister trying to cope with the brother who's just piling on manipulation and guilt and shame and trying to make them be the bad guy.
Yeah. Yeah.
When they're trying to set up some healthy boundaries. So, yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about the person who's living with the addict, all right? So let's say this is your situation, your spouse, just for the sake of conversation, your spouse is doing a lot more drinking than you believe is healthy. And it didn't just start yesterday. You've seen the pattern going for a while. Maybe you even were partaking in that some years back.
Which makes it tough because
well, we did it together. That's how we met, right? We met on the beach
right.
while we were drinking, all right? And that's a different story for a different time. And so we gave an approval to it at some point in time. Maybe not intentionally, but we gave some level of approval.
Yep.
All right, and so that's one of the very first things that we have to recognize our part in. All right, and I'm not saying that you did the wrong thing. You were kind of in life there, and again, you were just working through it together. But all of a sudden, you start to realize, okay, this drinking is really starting to change the course of how we would probably be living.
Yeah.
Maybe it's changing how we spend time together. Maybe it's changing how we spend money. Maybe it's changing how our kids are being raised because one of us is not there or not psychologically, emotionally there. So how do we go about recognizing that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think part of it is that you have to recognize that something needs to change. Part of the cycle of change is identifying the need. And so part of that is recognizing that. Now, you may recognize it, but they don't. That's where the problem comes in, that you're not on the same page. And so what I tell folks who come into my classes that are realizing there's a problem is you've got to surround yourself with people who have healthy boundaries, who have this thing kind of figured out a little bit better so that you have support. Because the first thing the addict's going to do is make you think you're crazy, make you think you're the problem.
Right.
They're going to manipulate things to turn the tables to make it your fault. And so you've got to surround yourself with people who are in a healthy place that can help you kind of speak into this situation in a healthy way. And the Bible says to speak the truth in love, but do it with gentleness and respect.
Okay.
So you don't call them out, you don't throw them under the bus and at a bar.
Right.
You do it in a healthy way.
Yeah, so this is kind of a lot of times where we see people early on when they recognize, okay, this is now getting to be a little bit more than just some casual drinking or whatever the addiction is. And once we kind of get upset, oftentimes we attack it.
Sure.
Right? And so
or attack them.
Attack them. That's and so we jump on it and we kind of we don't really own maybe our part in it.
Yep.
We get to that, and if you attack somebody, 9 times out of 10, they're not going to roll over and say,
sure.
"You're exactly
You're
right.
right.
I think I've been a drunk for way too long." They're not
going to
say
why
that.
I didn't think of that on my own. Yeah.
Instead, they put their fist up,
Sure.
so to speak, and they become defensive.
Sure.
And once we get somebody in a defensive mode, it's very hard to get out of the defensive stance.
Yep.
And so we see this go on for years now. That topic can't even be brought up now because we know where it's going to go. Right?
Yep.
So the very first thing that we really encourage you to do is once you've kind of identified, and maybe you've even had to talk and seek some counsel, just to say, hey, is this too much?
Right.
Am I just seeing things?
Right.
Am I overthinking here?
Right.
And we start to say, no, this is real. Then exactly what you said, we approach it first with love, with kindness.
And a plan.
And a plan.
Yeah.
And so we do this in a way, and one of the things that I always think is very important is if we get into the telling them how, all right, we're going to shut them down. But if we get in and we tap into the relationship side, all right, so by saying, hey, hon, we need to talk. I'm struggling. I'm struggling right now.
Using
and
I statements that
Yeah,
I feel
all right.
insecure. I am struggling. I'm worried.
Yes.
Not you are the problem.
Right. If I go in right away and say you're struggling, you are causing
You have an
this.
issue.
Right. But instead say I'm struggling, and I need your help. Okay. So now I'm actually asking the addict for help. Most of the time when we ask people for help, they can't wait to help. If I demand that somebody helps me, okay, if I ask it and
Or
command
point
it
finger and you
and
say
point
you're the
fingers,
problem.
I get a totally different response.
Yep.
So I go to them not as an attack, but to say, hey, I'm needing some help here.
Yeah.
And we start to engage the conversation. All right. Now, there's no guarantee that engagement is going to all of a sudden just go
well.
perfectly right.
No.
But we open the door to that and see how well it's received.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you use the example of a spouse, but as a parent, I had a mom in one of my classes that they're teenagers downstairs smoking weed and doing his thing and drinking all he wants, and mom felt like she had no power or control over that. And so we kind of had to create a plan for her on how, because man, that was going to be a huge change in that house. One that she now recognized through the class was unhealthy. That situation was unhealthy. And so she had to have a plan in place before she sat down with that teenager. And that happens all the time with kids. Let's say you decided that, we've let them have too much technology. It's become an addiction for them. Well, don't just grab their phone and say, now you can't have it. You're going to have to come up with a plan of why and how and all that.
Yeah, so once we've confronted that, then we actually have to do one of your favorite topics. We have to set some boundaries.
Yep.
And again, you're not setting the boundaries on your spouse at this point. You're not setting the boundaries on your spouse.
For them,
You're coming together and you're saying, okay, here, I feel like there's some things that we need to work on here. And you start to set some boundaries. And you see if you can get some buy-in with that. And you can start to feel their heart as to whether they're going to stay in that relationship and work for it, or if they're going to shut down, all right? If they buy into the boundary setting, like, hey, you know what, I'm not going to drink this anymore, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do that. If they buy in, hey, great. Okay, we're moving in the right direction at least. If there's not buy-in on the boundary, then we do have to set boundaries on ourselves.
Yep.
We have to set boundaries on ourselves. And this is where we often fall short.
Yep.
We tolerate. We put up with the garbage that
We get
continues.
tired. We give up.
And we also, there's that dependency, right? Excuse me. If this person is still going to job, they're going to work, they have a job, they're paying bills, they're a contributor at some level still. We go, I still need him.
We rationalize it.
And we rationalize it and we get stuck. And so we have to set boundaries first for the situation. And by the way, when you help set a boundary in a relationship, you can't just put it on them. You have to make discussion with, and here's how I will help.
Right.
Here's what I will do.
And you can't just do it one day and then the next kind of blow through it and ignore what you set up. It's got to be a consistent change in the relationship. You can't own their problem. You can have empathy, but you can't own their problem.
Yeah.
And that's a child or an adult. You got to surround yourselves with positive people and support. That's huge. That's why we talked about faith last week in a church home. If you maybe just decide, okay, I can't have this conversation with them yet, but I'm going to start surrounding myself with some different circles of people. And maybe you go find a church. Maybe you find a support group. Celebrate Recovery is not just for the addict. It's for the codependent. It's for the family member on how to get some healthy relationships and support for what you're wanting it to do.
Yeah.
You can't let the addict isolate you. One thing they'll want you to do is to not talk to anybody about it, to not get help, because they don't want anybody to know their business. It's our secret. And that is so dangerous. Satan loves to keep anything in the dark that God would want to redeem in the light. And so please do not let whatever this is, and you're probably having things go through your mind as you listen here, don't let that have a hold over you. It's a chain.
Yeah.
And Satan would love to use it against you.
Yeah. And so when you build those boundaries up, when you set this up to confront the situation, all right, we also ask that you think this through, Like, so what happens? What's the worst case scenario?
Right.
What,
Play it out.
Play it out. Like, okay, so
They move out.
He moves out. So he does this. So he does that. What does that look like? The more I can keep my logical brain engaged to the problem solving, the better success I'm going to have.
Yep.
If I allow things to just spree something out of my mouth with anger or contempt, I'm probably going to get that right back, and then I'm going to be frazzled.
Yep.
So I think about, okay, so what happens if he does leave? What happens? How am I going to take care of the kids? And we start to think about getting that plan together, and that will keep us calm, keep us reassured.
Yeah. You know, I would really encourage you, if you're listening tonight and you have family or you yourself are struggling with addiction or codependency, you seek some outside professional help. Do not try to do this alone. This is a tough topic. This is a tough battle that you're in, but there is hope. There is help. If you don't know where to begin, then give us a call. I'm not saying we're going to be the answer for you, but we would definitely connect you. We have enough resources and connections in the area that we can get you the help that you need. And depending on what it is, every situation is different. So call 1-812-576-ROCK. That's 812-576-ROCK. 7625 is the end. That we'll get you connected with the help that you need.
Yeah. So you're doing this for you're doing this for the addict.
Yeah.
The word that gets thrown around here, and it's just crazy that this is how we describe it, but I have to go to tough love. I have to use tough love, and we use this with our kids. We use it with our spouses that are in these addictions. It's not tough love, it's real love. It's what real love is. It's you're not doing this because you're angry at the person. You're doing it because the last thing you want to see them do is destroy their life or the lives of you or your kids or whoever else they're connected to. So this is just real love. We are called to do this. We are called to be honest and loving. And we're trying to do the best we can to be what Christ would be in this situation.
We want to break the cycle. You know, part of Rock Solid Radio is that we are building a stronger community, one family at a time. So just imagine the ripple effect it can have if your family gets healthy, if you start to set healthy boundaries in your home, if you start to break that cycle of addiction, that all of a sudden its ripples effect out into the community. It goes to the schools, the churches, the neighborhoods, it's just a huge effect. And so we are passionate about this. This is what we have dedicated the rest of our lives to, is just say, hey, we can make a difference here, but one family at a time.
Yeah. So addiction is slavery.
Yes.
You're being owned. What's even worse is being a spouse or a child in an addictive situation makes you living with a very disgruntled slave.
Yeah.
And that slave then, because they are so disgruntled, will completely alter your path. So it's time to break those chains.
Yep.
It's time to get free. Yes, there's conflict oftentimes in trying to break away to get freedom.
Absolutely. And that's where you need the support.
And that's where we want to be part of that support system. And so we encourage you to be bold, always seeking out God's Word, always seeking out. We talked last week about having faith, and faith creates hope and peace.
Yep.
And so this is something we strongly, we have no writing on the wall that says this addiction is only going to last for this long and then it'll be gone.
But I will say, and God can attest to this, is that He does redeem. And He's got a plan, even for every tear, every painful moment that you've experienced in addiction with you or your family, that God can bring glory from. There's a group, and I would love, if this is a topic that hits home with you, check out the LIT movement. LIT means Living in Testimony. They have a Facebook page, but this is a group of men, mostly some women, who can testify that through their addiction, God redeemed them and set them free. And they are living in testimony. They are helping the addict, helping the family say there is hope, there is help out there. I love these guys. They're doing some great stuff. And so we are excited about that. Also, Celebrate Recovery, I mentioned earlier, is a 12-step Christ-based recovery program that is not just for the addict, but it is also for the family. You can go to celebraterecovery.com or .org, I think, and check that out. And you can put your zip code in and find. I know Whitewater Crossing has one, White Oak Christian Church has one, Church on Fire has one. They're all over to say, okay, I'm going to take a step to get support and get help.
Yeah. Okay, so we need to wrap it up. So if we can help you in any way, please contact us.
Yes.
In the meantime, we want to say thank you to Maxwell Construction, Buffalo Wings and Rings, Greendale Cinemas, and La Rosa's Pizza. Get out there, make it a great night, and make it a great week.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Rock Solid Radio. For help or more information about what you've heard this evening, contact us at rocksolidfamilies.org or call us at 812-576-ROCK. That's 812-576-ROCK. Again, a huge thanks to our sponsors, La Rosa's and Buffalo Wings and Rings in Greendale, Indiana, Greendale Cinema, and Maxwell Construction. If you have questions you'd like answered on air or want to chime in on something you heard this evening, go to our Facebook page, Rock Solid Families. We'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to tune in next Sunday evening at 7:30 for another episode of Rock Solid Radio. I'm Linda Hutchinson, and for my husband Merrill and I, thanks for tuning in on your hometown radio, Eagle Country 99.3.